Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Learn at Lunch programming from I Quit to I Fit, Psychological Resilience for Breakthrough Success, presented by Dr. Drea Letamendi. This is hosted by the UCLA Staff Assembly. We're very excited to have you join us. And I would like to introduce to you my colleague, Grace Francesca. She's the Vice President of Wellness, and I'm the Vice President of Programs. And so we do a lot of the different programming and educational related webinars for UCLA Staff Assembly. Grace? You're unmute.
The challenges of Zoom. Thank you, Gayan. I'm so pleased to introduce Dr. Letamendi, who is a clinical psychologist, media consultant, and TEDx speaker with degrees from Cornell University, UCSD, and UCLA. For 3 years, Dr. Drea has served as the Interim Director for UCLA Rice Center and also as the Associate Director for Mental Health Training, Intervention, and Response in Residential Life. And Dr. Drea, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
I'm about to share my screen and show some visuals here as we get this webinar started. But first, I just want to thank everybody for being present and attending this webinar today. I know we have so many different things on our plates, different responsibilities, interests, work tasks that are all on our minds. And so the idea that you're taking some time to care for yourself and be present today is just really in the spirit of what psychological resilience is. And so I just want to thank everybody for taking the time for you and for your self-care. I also want to mention that I'm very grateful and so very lucky to be asked to do this webinar. So just want to extend my thanks to both Gayan and Grace and others, Natalie, others who have been involved in preparing this event for y'all and rescheduling when unfortunately I was not in a healthy place. I had gotten the flu and we had to reschedule this. So I just want to thank everybody for your flexibility and your continued interest in this topic. And so with that, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And thanks to everybody for a little bit of tech support in advance. It looks like we've got things going and we can get started here. Thanks so much for the lovely introduction. I am a licensed clinical psychologist and I've had a couple of roles here at UCLA that I'm very proud of. I served as the interim director of the UCLA Rice Center. And if we have time, I will talk a little bit about the center and the services that they provide. Currently, I am the associate director in residential life, and I provide consultation, support, training, and other opportunities and other educational developmental learning opportunities for the department around the topics of suicide prevention, mental health support, and crisis response. And then finally, I am a media consultant and work. I have a private practice in consultation, which I'm very lucky to be able to do in some of my extra time and really see that as part of this sort of professional self-care and being able to extend the work into other areas of psychology. As we get started here, I know that often when we join a webinar about self-care, resilience, our mental health, we're going to probably talk about some of the challenges and difficulties. And so I do want to start there, but I promise you that much of this talk will be strength-based. This will be about our capacity for maintaining and sustaining hope, our ability to find the cognitive flexibility and focus that we need in this very difficult time, and also a very healthy reflection and understanding of the past few years that we have continued to address and face hardships. And that becomes a part of our psychological repertoire. And so I want to uplift and celebrate that too. This is strength-based, but not solely focused on the positive, because I think we need to have some more sophistication around our mental health. I do also want to say, before we dive into this first exercise, that for all of you attending, oh my gosh, almost 100 people so far, even being in a space of mental health reflection. So taking the time you are taking right now to have what's called health consciousness, to practice health consciousness, almost like an insight or a perspective about how you're doing, that in and of itself is one of the strongest things we can do, a predictor of well-being, a very good resilient practice that you can do every day. So I just want to give y'all kudos and credit for just even being here, shifting your mind into your internal psychological well-being is a part of self-care. And so how you want to spend that time is really up to you. If you want to take notes, if you want to lie down and think of this as a podcast, if you want to multitask, because I know a lot of folks do this over our lunch break, if you want to enjoy a meal, however it is that you feel is going to be the best for you at this time, I celebrate that and I support you. I also just want to uplift that this is a very values-based webinar, that I care about and want to celebrate and honor the values that you have and come into this webinar with. And my assumption as a consultant in various fields is, in terms of professional development, is that anytime we can exercise our values, reflect on our values, and be driven by our values is absolutely critical for our well-being. And I want to ensure that that's a continuous, constant part of this conversation. So in this first brief exercise, this is really a bit of a mental reflection for everybody to participate in. You can close your eyes and reflect on this. You can write this down. Maybe if you're watching this webinar with somebody, you can share it. I believe we have a Q&A and chat feature. I'm not sure if the chat enabled, if folks want to share. It is, great. So if you feel confident, you want to put it in the chat. The reflection question is to think about one or two of your biggest challenges since around this time, 2020. Around this time, 2020. So since 2020, think about one or two of your biggest challenges. What was that like for you? Where were you at the time? Who were you with at the time? What made it challenging? You might sit with that feeling or that memory or that idea, and it can be hard. It can be hard to look back on the hardships, the challenges, and honestly, the traumas that some of us might have experienced during that time. And why this is a strength-based reflection activity is that often sometimes when we think about our past hardships, we also can have access to how we endured that, what we were able to do to overcome that difficulty. There's a word for this, it's psychological distancing. It's anytime, it's almost like time travel. Anytime we go in the future or in our past, mentally, of course, to think about a situation, an incident, or a period of our life that really mattered to us. And the strength around psychological distancing is our capacity as humans to build up and develop an appreciation for how we got to where we got. So it could be what we were able to do to endure the hardship. For a lot of us, it's the social support. Who did we rely on? Who did we depend on? Who was there with us to get us through the hard times? It may be a particular skill or a part of your identity that you feel very proud of. Maybe it's tenacity, maybe it's family values, maybe it's being a leader, and that really allowed you to dig into the moment and make it through that hardship. I see a few people sharing in the chats. Thanks so much. Some folks are saying, sharing a little bit about their memories about the last few years. And I encourage you, if you'd like to keep sharing your thoughts and your experiences. one of the reasons I do like to start here is that we aren't able to really delete or erase this part of our past, that many of us continue to carry the aftermath of the last few years, again, the hardships and stressors that we experienced in our personal lives and on the job, right? And so as a psychologist, I really do just want to affirm that. It's very true that a lot of us were taking so many different steps and precautions and significant changes in our life to take care of our physical health. We were following the CDC. We were following, if you're in Los Angeles County, the lockdown order. There were so many things that we did just in care of our physical bodies and in care of the physical bodies of the people in our household, people that we care about. And yet that led to increased risk for mental health challenges and mental health struggles. Just to name a few that were noted in the research include increased isolation. So of course, the physical isolation that we were experiencing at the time, less contact with loved ones, with coworkers, with colleagues, with family members and friends. And of course, this looming uncertainty, the very, in the beginning, especially an unnamed experience or feeling of, how is this going to turn out? That almost a negative cognitive experience around that. And of course, what we know from emerging literature is that many different communities experienced the pandemic differently, I would say in a disproportionate way. In fact, let me just name, just last year, the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a national state of emergency surrounding youth mental health, which in my lifetime, I don't think I've ever heard of this before, but what that means is that the increased risk of depression, anxiety, sleep disturbance, suicidality among young people, 10 to 22, emerged as a national crisis. So if you are someone who cares for somebody in that age range, maybe you are someone in that age range, maybe, as a university staff, you work with folks in that age range, we were seeing really the impact of these concerns. And I also want to note too that different communities had different access to care, different access to medical and mental health support, different access to community and social supports. And that disparity led to, again, a disproportionate effect on certain groups, in particular communities of color in Los Angeles, especially. Working caregivers, folks, parents, guardians who were tackling and managing so many different new roles and stressors during this time. And of course, essential workers. Some of us may identify with more than one of these categories, and almost like a double or triple jeopardy, where you're having to sustain numerous physical and mental health consequences. And so I definitely want to move forward here with some strategies, but I think it's important not to move away from or deny ourselves the self-awareness and even the resilience that exists as a part of this shared experience. Something that, as I mentioned, is critical to the concept of resilience work in our occupational health has to do with our outlook. And I've said this in a few different ways, be values-based or talk about the spirit of the work. And one word that I think really captures this concept is worldview. Worldview is considered many things. I like this definition. I'll read it out loud. A commitment. Worldview is your fundamental orientation of the heart that can be expressed as a story which we hold consciously or subconsciously, consistently or inconsistently, and that provides the foundation on which we live and move and have our being. And perhaps as we sit with that idea, of course, I want to ask everybody to connect with their worldview. Again, we're so busy in our day-to-day tasks, our day-to-day lives. We are encountering bigger portfolios, fuller days, more and more appointments. And the practice of taking care of ourselves should not wait until 5 or 6 p.m. or even 8 p.m., maybe when you get home, or 9 p.m. when you've tended to the family members or others in your household, to your pets, to your loved ones, to your spouses. Rather, self-care and resiliency work in our jobs, it should happen throughout the day. It should happen and be present from the moment we arrive at our work, whether that's in person or that's at a desk or sort of your office setup at home if you're remote. That switch in mentality is something that we don't think about too much. It's kind of just like a light switch, right? We turn it on, we're on the job. And more researchers are noticing that the blending of work and personal life, especially after the pandemic, has become more and more muddy and mutable. And so I think a fundamental perspective around, okay, how do I practice self-care during the workday, during my time that I'm working, is to consider this concept of worldview, taking moments to tune back into your set of values, the potential for reigniting what inspires you, the potential for reminding yourself, as it says, what does make you move? What does make you live? What is your commitment? What's in your heart? And if you can take even a few seconds to remind yourself of your worldview, it can be such a strong protective factor as we tackle some of the stressors in this work. I know a lot of people are familiar with mindfulness, and what I've done in this talk is just included a sort of a very brief and general idea, because mindfulness has numerous different practices and theories and states of mind. But in general, the idea of mindfulness is really an intentional state of mind. Mindfulness is paying attention on purpose. So that means increasing this awareness in the present moment. So focusing on the here and now, non-judgmentally, with an openness to what's happening in our bodies and our minds and our spirits. This is the hard part, and with loving kindness, a sense of care and love and compassion for the self. And when we're dealing with self-doubts, imposter syndrome, sometimes feeling like we failed or that we let our colleagues down, feeling like we let ourselves down, that last piece can be hard, that loving kindness, giving yourself permission to have flaws, permission to be developmental, to know I'm still learning. I've been at UCLA. I've had 3 different jobs at UCLA. This is my 3rd. I've been here in this mental health role for 5 years, and I continue to learn and grow and develop. And even though it's very hard, I have to remind myself, this is a very, very large institution with complicated structures and systems. And the imperfection of this institution may weigh on me, and my own work may weigh on me. But how can I give myself permission, a little bit of space for self-awareness, for rest, for compassion, in order to be present and engaged in the work that I do? So there's a bit of acceptance here, whole acceptance. In the spirit of actualizing this with everybody now, I'd like to ask that everybody take a moment to do a basic exercise in mindfulness that's known as a moment of mindfulness and breathing, or some people know this as 3-3-6 breathing. And I'm going to give a brief instruction, and then I'll be silent so that you can take a moment to practice this. You inhale for 3 seconds. You can count in your own mind. 1, 2, 3. Hold for 3 seconds. 3. And exhale for 6 seconds. 4, 5, 6. And continue repeating the pattern in your own pace. Taking that breath in deeply to your diaphragm. And exhaling. And if you are like me and you struggle with maintaining a mindful mind, focus, sometimes having your hand on your abdomen can help you focus your breath there. Okay, and let's come back. Slowly bring yourself back, open your eyes, swivel around in your chair, squeeze your toes, your fingers, regain focus into your space. One of the reasons, even though it's quite a simple exercise, one of the reasons I like 3-3-6 breathing is how immediate it is and how often we can do something like this. Maybe we just need to calm the self, rest the body. Maybe our minds are very busy and we need to regain control, regain focus. So it's a universal, quick, almost sort of emergency self-care exercise that we occasionally need to use. I do this sometimes. I keep my eyes open, but I do this sometimes when I am trying to traverse from the valley into Westwood. It's never a predictable visit. And so I always try to think about taking care of myself during my commute. That's one way. I've talked about a couple of physiological and mental ways we can kind of get in the moment. One being tuning into your values and just trying to ground yourself. The other is a brief breathing exercise. And I'd love to know, using the chat, what are the kinds of things that you have learned, especially over the last couple of years, has grounded you, has reignited your energy, has made you feel ready to go at work? Go ahead and put that in the chat and share with your colleagues. All right, so I see Stephanie sharing yoga and painting. I see, hi Lisa, morning walks, love that, love that. Shelly saying Soul Cycle. Fantastic. Exercise, Pilates, painting, getting outdoors, even for a walk around the block, prayer. Thank you, Kathy. Tea time, yes. Taking naps, making sleep a priority, outdoor walks, excellent, excellent. I see a handful of different accessible things, moving the body, resting the mind, spending time with pets. Research shows that even having a pet on your lap or near you, that proximity can be healing for us, can calm our bodies, can be a sense of security, and even give us a sense of purpose. So for you pet owners, pet parents, there's some healing there related to having pets. Beautiful. Food, Barbara, I'm with you. Usually comfort food that I grew up eating, food that reminds me of my family. Yes, fantastic. So I asked this, first, it's always helpful to kind of see what others are doing. Maybe this has sparked an idea for you. Maybe you have stopped doing your morning walks and you realize, okay, I've got to put that back into my routine again. And I think we've essentially nailed all three of these different areas. But when I talk about this concept of self-care, I actually, and some of you have heard me talk about self-care in a critical way. We cannot simply tell our colleagues, our leadership, our mentees, practice self-care, you'll be fine. We really need to understand what we mean by self-care. Self-care and trauma, the word self-care, these have become ubiquitous in our media, and it's lost its meaning a little bit. So let's regain our sense of what that really means for us in our personhood. So I think of self-care in these three different areas. You'll notice it says HHH, head, heart, and hustle. So when I'm super stressed, I just remind myself, head, heart, and hustle. What are those three domains I can tune into right now? Head, heart, and hustle. And what the first one is looking toward practices that restore you. So what is going to essentially re-energize, reignite you, encourage you to stay in focus? This could be, and some of you actually mentioned these things, hanging out with friends, being creative, praying, volunteering. This is really kind of tuning into our values, right? What reminds you of who you are? What's important to you? What do you do to rest? So this is absolutely necessary for ourselves. When I work with students and learn about some of their sleeping habits, I'll say like, look, this is probably the most boring thing a psychologist is going to tell you, but getting enough sleep at night is so critical to your ability to manage stress. When we are sleeping, that's when all of that stress regulation happens in our system, and it's so critical. But it's more than just sleeping, right? Rest also means taking breaks from high impact, highly agitating or busy environments, right? We need to take screen breaks. We need to create spaces around us that are soothing and comforting to us. We need to practice meditation, breathing exercises. I work with students who tell me, I actually need something a little bit more physiological, kind of to like put me into a rest mode. And so sometimes a very hot shower might be helpful, just to kind of get them physically ready to transition from their busy day into being restful. This last one is kind of creeping into the area of work, because it's how do we tend to ourselves? What do we do to work on ourselves? Tending to the self is how we honor our own growth and development. So this is just like we think about like tending to a plant, a flower, or tending to a pet, right? What are those nutrients? We are complex human beings. What are the nutrients we need? And some of this might be like, okay, I need to make that doctor's appointment. I need to open up that Excel spreadsheet and figure out my taxes. I need to look at those 3 piles of laundry that have been sitting there for 3 weeks. Maybe I need to get to that. And so some of this is tending to our environment, ourselves, and some of this is tending to our mindset, tending to our mental development, our emotional well-being. There's a great amount of research that relates this resilience work to what's called psychological capital, or PsyCap for short. And in a lot of more recent organizational psychology studies, it's shown that PsyCap is a crucial and incredible strategic feature to focus on and to improve in the workforce. A lot of people think, we need to think about like financial wellness and intellectual development. And this is all true. We all want to be skillful in our jobs, in our different roles. But it's shown that PsyCap, or psychological capital, is really critical, not just to our mental well-being, but overall to employee performance, to employee job satisfaction, and to retention. And so I know a lot of folks here who might be supervisors, leaders, running teams, thinking about your strategies. Do not leave out, please, please, please do not leave out this concept of psychological capital in yourself and in your among your colleagues. And so, okay, how do we do that? What exactly can we do to develop PsyCap in ourselves and our teams? And Fred Luthens is the researcher who came up with this concept of HERO. HERO is an acronym that stands for hope, efficiency, resilience, and optimism. Hope is an optimistic state of mind based on an expectation of a positive outcome. So I think this can resonate for a lot of us. How do we think about our actions and behaviors leading to having good intentions, right? Leading to a positive outcome. Efficiency is also, efficacy is also familiar to us, the belief in our own capacity to fulfill expectations, to execute behaviors that are necessary in our job. And so, we might have mentors who believe in us and see that efficacy, see that that capacity in us, but we need to find that in ourselves. We need to ground ourselves in that sense of self-awareness around what we know we're good at. It's an exciting celebration, knowing what you're good at and being able to lead with that. Resilience, we've been talking today a lot about resilience. This is our ability to deal with change and anticipate challenges with a sense of readiness and curiosity. I think in the last couple of years, all of us have been building resilience, learning important lessons about not just our mental capacity and our emotional capacity, but this concept that because there were so many unpredictable hardships and structural, institutional, work-related changes that honestly many of us could not predict or be ready for. We've now gained that muscle. We've sort of strengthened that muscle to have a sense of readiness and a willingness to shift or pivot when we need to. And, again, being strength-based, how do we, rather than surround ourselves with the negatives of the aftermath, think about what we've learned from those moments. And optimism is a more of a generic idea here. This is the attitude that reflects a belief that a specific outcome will be positive, favorable, and desirable. And trust that these various capacities and features are not only identifiable in various people in the job, but that can actually be somewhat contagious when we see this kind of work happen. We get eager and almost excited to be alongside that kind of energy. And really, that's what this work around being a hero at work means. I also do want to acknowledge that we're not taking a rose-colored glasses approach here, in that we understand that work and various experiences at work can create a sense of demoralization and a sense of disappointments. And all of us have different experiences of that. Prior to coming to UCLA, I worked in foster care, I worked in child welfare work, and much of my job was to deliver burnout reduction workshops and webinars for our social workers. And what I learned in that work is, certainly this idea of self-care being an everyday, daily activity, it became so clear to me. But when the work itself, when you're asked to do, or when a part of your job faces trauma, hardship, and aspects of demoralization, it's very difficult to stay strength-based. I think a part of those experiences can certainly weigh heavy on us. And this concept of burnout isn't so much about the physical exhaustion, although I admit that's there, but it's, in addition to that, it's this sense of disrupted spirituality. And I don't mean that in a religious way. I mean disrupted spirituality, a sense that the person, the soul that you have within yourself has been disrupted, has been interrupted, has been deteriorating in some way. That's when we truly see burnout become an issue in the work. And I use, boy, I love acronyms. I use these 3 Ds to kind of remind ourselves, okay, what is this going to look like? Deterioration of the self. So this is when we feel like we cannot bounce back anymore. We cannot recover at the end of the day. Who am I? What is my most beloved identity? What is my most beloved value? If we cannot connect to that, that's a concern. A sense of detachment, which is honestly, sometimes I see this among young people, among students. I don't know why I'm working so hard anymore. I'm losing sight. I'm losing the personal connection to what this work really is for me. And then derailment is, often sort of the pivotal and critical perspective of burnout. And it may happen at our most crispy fried level of burnout, which is, feeling completely off track. I almost don't know how I got here mentally. And so all of these things are measurable. They're all ideas that hopefully are accessible to you, I do want to offer up the Headington Institute. If you Google that, there are burnout assessments, the checklists that you can take that will let you know what level of burnout you might be, and some really excellent solutions and strategies on that website. So it's called Headington Institute, which is where I get a lot of my resources. So I'm curious to hear from folks. I could list all the ways that I get burnt out, but I'm wondering if folks, since you've been so fantastic in the chat, if you could drop in those signs for you. What does that look like for you? Do you start to feel physically exhausted? Do you find that it's hard to focus? I notice that it's people in my household who will tell me kindly, gently, hey, are you paying attention? Because I'm doing so many things at once. I've even had my pets nudge me, okay, it's 5:02 and mealtime is here. And that kind of distracts me into knowing like, okay, I think I'm a little bit off track. So Nita, thank you for mentioning numbness, a sense of numbness, almost a distancing or detachment there. Terry, thank you for mentioning irritability. So feeling sometimes on edge, agitated, a short fuse. And this is not to be judgmental, but when we think about this concept of being chronically stressed out, that there's almost no room for additional stressors, additional conflicts. So the moment that we face that, it's almost as if we snap or we feel irritable or agitated. Lily says road rage, absolutely. Random anger, finding yourself just sort of feeling an angry outburst for no reason, being unable to think clearly. And Jerry is saying exhausted and sad. Yeah. I've learned that burnout is not, it's not impersonal. Burnout is so personal. Burnout is going to attach to us depending on the work that we do. Yeah, so when I was working in child welfare work, my burnout, thank you, Jerry, for saying sad. My burnout was around sadness. My burnout was around exposure to trauma, inability to make change. I felt hopeless. I felt useless. I felt that I wasn't able to, to kind of live up to or fulfill expectations as I continuously was facing childhood trauma, community trauma, family trauma. So I want to kind of think about that too here, is that we can sit here and name all the different burnout symptoms or ideas, but know that it's going to have a personality to it. It's going to attach to the work that you do. And also it's going to attack your values. So when we think back to our worldview, what makes us feel connected to ourselves, what makes us feel reignited, restorative, a lot of times burnout will distract us from that or deteriorate those senses. I want to name the TEND Academy, T-E-N-D, TEND Academy, which is, it's been around, it's a Canadian company, nonprofit, been around for, at least 10, 15 years, who came up with this concept of the burnout continuum. And, again, I wanted to arrive today with really achievable things that you can do like right away. And I think the continuum is something that we can apply literally today. Find out for yourself what your green, yellow, and red zone is related to your burnout. Green is when you feel productive, happy, connected, engaged, right? Yellow is when you start to notice that sense of deterioration. Some people have mentioned here in the chat the physiological sensations of burnout. You might start to feel that in your body. So know for yourself what that looks like. And then, of course, red is sort of an alarm. It means we've gotten there. We have realized that we're in a burnout state. And having had this personal experience, it does creep up on you. It's a very gradual concept. It is what psychologists would call cumulative, right? So building up on itself, and until you feel as though, you need to take a time out. Maybe you need to take time off of work or take time out for yourself to regain focus and work toward managing this level of stress. And I think I've gotten to this a little bit just in terms of personalizing burnout. I really do not want to forget that each of us, as we encounter our career adventures, our career journeys, that our sense of self is such a critical part of how we feel, going back to that hero concept, feeling hopeful, feeling efficacious, feeling proud of ourselves. We also need to be in a social and occupational work environment where we belong. Our identities, our personhood, our sense of who we are really matters in those spaces, that we're able to be authentic and real with those colleagues, teams, supervisors, whoever it is that you might spend time with, clients, consumers, students, faculty, that when this vulnerable idea, am I blank enough, comes into your mind space, this is when we really do need to practice that health consciousness, that sort of inward insight. What is that blank for you? Am I smart enough? Am I seasoned enough? Am I intellectual enough? Am I a leader? Am I a good enough leader? In spaces like this, if you are, for instance, the only person who identifies as a person of color or female, or with a particular identity or background as LGBTQ+, sometimes these feelings of self-doubt are a product of our environment, right? Do I see others in leadership who look like me, who I can relate to, who see me, who validate me? This question of, am I enough, is complex. But as I talk about it in this way, I think I want to relate it to this really important concept of well-being in the workplace, that the number one predictor of self-harm and suicide is thwarted belongingness. Thwarted belongingness, not feeling accepted, not feeling together, not feeling that you can be in that space. And so this question, though it becomes quite personal now, is a pretty critical one in the conversation about resilience. I'm not going to go through all these examples, but I did feel it was important to understand that as we work on building and developing our resiliency, we also address, and if we can, change the environments that might worsen those experiences, might hinder our ability to be ourselves, to be efficacious, to be hopeful. And for individuals, this may come up as physical symptoms of stress, mental signs like lack of focus, having poor memory, having self-doubts, emotional signs. Someone mentioned numbness, and that can be incredibly alarming for someone to just sort of feel like there is nothing left in there. I've done and done and done and worked and complied, and I'm losing sense of my emotional well-being. And I also want to name too that kind of psychological piece that, as a mixed race Latinx woman, I do think about this pretty frequently. In what part of my work am I honoring my culture and being able to be present and practice some of these health consciousness exercises? And in what periods or times do I feel a bit of self-erasure, that in order to be efficacious, in order to be in that hero mindset, I'm erasing some part of my culture, whether it's a heritage, an identity, a way of being, a way of talking, a way of presenting oneself, however that matters to you. That aspect of self-erasure is also a part, for many, many of us here at UCLA, a part of our career journeys. And having a connection to that, I think, is a really important part of this self-awareness and consciousness. I have a couple more slides, and then I'm going to wrap up with the Rise Center, and then I'll talk a little bit about answering any questions if we have them. But in kind of presenting this or articulating this concept of self-care around the authentic person, what I really am talking about is decolonizing the self-care movement. This concept, as I said, like the self-care field, or even the self-care industry, the wellness industry, becoming in and of itself a source of power that could be good for us, but in many ways may not be good for us. And I think what I'm trying to say there is that sometimes you have to reclaim your own sense of self-care and what matters to you. If we go back to the elements of resiliency in sparking a sense of success in our careers, again, being efficacious, being positive-minded, having cognitive flexibility, we for ourselves need to learn and honor what that means for our personhood. And it may be different than the messages coming through in our media, right? The media may be giving us, or this larger social stratosphere may be giving us messages about self-care that may not be helpful for us. So, here I recommend just having either some conversations with people that you trust and care about, or maybe doing this on your own, having some self-reflection around what part of your self-care do you feel feels more about that consumerism, that commodification of well-being, and what part actually does feel pretty restorative. And that's a really good way to sort of do inventory on all the different ways in which you're practicing your self-care. And then, I really do want to think about care in our work environment and how that kind of applies to what we're doing in our larger work atmosphere or environment. And this concept of building mental health literacy is probably not new for a lot of us, but I'm using a structure that I've seen be used in organizational psychology, and I think it can be really accessible for us in our various roles here at UCLA. So the concept, or the acronym, is CARE, and the first one is to show concern. So this is really, again, an ability to be aware and to show in your own way and a sense of intuition for what's going on in your work environment. Are you willing to engage with others to learn how you can be supportive or be relied on? I mentioned the word awareness, and a part of this is what we're talking about today in the changing and shifting nature of mental health. But also, let's just name, 1 in 5, sometimes 1 in 4. It's at an institution like this, when we think about college students, 1 in 4 of us are diagnosed with mental health struggles, with a mental health condition. And so that's surely so many of us, in that rather than create this sort of us-them binary or concept that, well, not everybody needs resiliency work, to be more inclusive with this concept. All of us do need resiliency work, and many of us are struggling with mental health conditions. Reflect on your own words, behaviors, and actions. This is our capacity to take responsibility, I think, to promote a culture of positive health and acceptance. And finally, to practice empathy. So this is what we would consider support to look like from another person's perspective. And I have had people ask me, like, I'm kind of nervous about the empathy piece because I don't know how do I know how someone would want to be treated? And my shortcut to that is like, ask them, what can I do for you? How can I help you? What can you tell me that will help me gain an understanding of what you're going through? I'm here, I'm listening, I do care. And sometimes even just articulating, I don't even know what to say, but I'm here for you, is such a powerful demonstration of empathy, because it shows a willingness to be in a hurtful, painful place with them, but acknowledging that you're not sure where to start, right? I think a lot of us experience that right now. We have just a few minutes left, and I think it's just responsible to talk about our health as it relates to social media, because so much of our work and personal lives are connected to these digital identities. And, I've shared with some of you who I know, like Diane, I think I've shared this with you. I got this job at UCLA because I was on Twitter. And back 5-6 years ago, I was actively expressing my professional viewpoints, my activities, my webinars on Twitter. And that's how I got, a lot of opportunities. And so I want to start strength-based and say that many of us, especially if you're in careers where you might be underrepresented, or careers where you do have to take innovative steps, alternative steps, to achieve visibility, social media can be a huge step up for us. So I want to be strength-based here and say, do not toss out our digital media lifelines, but rather think about it in a more considerate way. I will quickly go through these 4 behaviors that have helped me and my clients work through the stress related to their digital media. A digital detox is when you turn off your phones, you turn off your screens, and you intentionally spend some time away from those interruptions. This can be scheduled in your day, or it can be done impromptu. The idea of intentionality is really so critical here, because what I'll hear from folks is like, well, I can't stop checking Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, or I'm on TikTok, and an hour later I realize I'm still on TikTok. I don't know what to do. And so what I would advise, or even prescribe for those folks who have a problem with digital media use, is before you even open up any app mindlessly, use intentionality. So instead of just opening it up, plan ahead. I'm going to message my sister on Facebook. I'm going to look at Instagram specifically for the cats. I'm going to open up this one person I really love on TikTok, and that's it. And I will close out. Give yourself that structure, and be kind to yourself, be accountable to yourself. Third, celebrate not knowing what's going on out there. Celebrate the simple and almost private time you might have with your own self. We don't have this as much anymore in this time, but this is really something that can reflect on your gratitude, reflect on your intuition, get you back again to those values. And then what I do with students a lot is do some check-ins, some mood ratings. So if there is an app that you really struggle with, give yourself a mood rating before you use the app, and then after you use the app. And if you find that indeed your stress went up, or your self-doubt, or some people will say their self-esteem plummeted, maybe reconsider even being in connection, having a relationship with that. What I'll say about the Rise Center is, please go to their website. They're undergoing a renovation right now, so the physical site won't be available for a number of weeks. But risecenter.ucla.edu is where you can find additional workshops and webinars on self-care, resiliency, tending to the self, tending to community. The last thing I'll say about the Rise Center is this is a series of supports for students at UCLA, but also for staff and for faculty and for family members. It's really a very huge success, and it's an accessible space. With this, just wrapping things up here, I do want to finalize this with loving kindness toward all of you, and hope that you continue this mindset as you wrap up your day, as you continue to wrap up this week, giving yourself kind, gentle, loving messages. I wish you support, care, compassion, hope, gratitude. These are all things that, and more, that I wish you, and that I hope that you continue to practice this for yourself as a mindfulness exercise, lifting up your own sense of empathy and upliftment and compassion. as I tend to do, I'm using up all of this time. So with that, I just have my contact information here and want to, again, just thank the staff assembly. They pour so many hours into supporting our UCLA institution and everyone involved. And I just want to thank you so much for taking this time to uplift mental health and resiliency at UCLA.
Thank you so much, Dr. Drea. This was a pleasure to have you attend and participate in our Learn at Lunch programming. We're so grateful for you and for all of the important ideas and lessons that you shared with us and discussed with us. We appreciate it. Grace will cover the Q&A section.
Yeah, I think we have time hopefully to answer a couple of questions. The first question is, how can one recover from work burnout without having to feel like they need to leave their job? It seems that learning new things is exciting, but learning old things a new way over and over is getting old and just exhausting. And in addition, just looking forward, there's a lot of increasing workload and changes and updates still coming up.
I love this question. As a consultant, I work with numerous leaders, CEOs, startup companies, and they often bring up this concept of staff feeling a sense of experiencing being adrift from their work, languishing, and wondering if they need to stay in that work. And I don't have a simple answer, but I often will draw upon the concepts of continuous self-development and agreeing with you that, really doing the same repetitive tasks or being expected to sort of be stagnant in one developmental mindset in any position is probably not good for the individual staff, but also not good for the employer, for the institution as a whole, because we want folks to stay sharp and innovative and developmental. And so if this is a conversation you have with leadership, it would be, how can I stay in a mindset or experience development? What are the kinds of projects, experiences, tasks that will make me feel challenged and useful? Let's talk about my skill set. Let's talk about my values and the things that I find really energizing and restorative. This also is a conversation for ourselves too. What am I spending too much time on, lingering around, even perseverating or fixating on things that are drawing up more stress for me, drawing up more resentment in me, and trying to find ways to minimize that exposure if you can.
Thank you. The next question is, how do you balance working hard and playing hard? Is it healthy to work hard and play hard?
Is it healthy to work hard and play hard? I don't know if I have an exact answer. I would say it really depends. It is healthy to work hard with the conditions that you are supported, you are acknowledged, you are seen, your self-care is appreciated, if not prioritized. That's when working hard really makes a lot of sense for us, right? Because we sort of know, again, that the self-care and resiliency development happens while we are working hard, not later in the day while we're putting kids to bed or feeding pets at 8 p.m. Yeah. So I think it's taking into account, yes, working hard is probably a shared value for a lot of us. But how is that acknowledged and received? And what is the experience of that in a positive way?
Thank you. And the last question is, are you available to have trainings, webinar for other departments on campus?
Great question. So I am no longer with the Rise Center. I continue to be in connection and partnership with the Rise Center. And so it may be a request that comes to the Rise Center, but certainly I'd be open to requests as well. Let me just put up my information if folks want to take a quick screenshot or write this down. This is my non-UCLA email if you're interested. I believe the webinar is recorded, and folks that are organizing the recording, you're welcome to share my UCLA email with folks who may be in correspondence with you about follow-up. And, again, I highly recommend the Rise Center too as a resource for resiliency webinars and workshops. Although I will have the caveat that they are very student focused. Sometimes they have opportunities for staff, faculty, and other employees.
Thank you, Dr. Drea. I just want to also echo that I've used the Rise Center before. I did their yoga, I did their journaling sessions and things like that, and highly recommend it. And with that, I just want to thank you. And I want to say that if you are interested, please follow us on social media, our website, which hosts a lot of our information. And with that, I'll turn it over to Gayan to close us out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. I just want to mention that if anyone is interested in volunteering and being a part of Staff Assembly, this is an organization that is for staff, by staff. A lot of what we do is volunteer based. So, and this is, a group of people who are very passionate, and we want to create change. We want to provide opportunities for staff to have a community, to be involved, and to understand all the different resources that we have available on campus for us. And so if you're interested in volunteering, or you're interested in running for an officer position and joining our 2023-2024 board, we welcome that. Thank you so much, Dr. Drea. We really appreciate you. Thank you for the Rise Center. And I hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you all. Take good care.